Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Martin Indyk, the Executive Vice President of Brookings. We're delighted to have you here this afternoon. And thank you to those of us joining us online via our webcast. Just a reminder that you can tweet about this event using the hashtag U.S Mexico. There it is. To say that a discussion about the U.S.-Mexican relationship is timely is kind of cliche at this point. The way in which Mexico and the issues related to U.S.-Mexican relations managed to be projected onto the stage of our elections last year and since then, with the advent of President Trump and his administration, is something quite remarkable and in many ways quite worrying. And therefore we felt it was very important to have an opportunity to discuss the issues related to Mexico and the relationship with the United States. We wanted to have a frank discussion about the critical issues involved in the relationship, from the issue of the wall and security, immigration, drugs, illicit drugs and arms issues, and of course, the really big one, the issue of NAFTA, the future of NAFTA, and the trading relationship between the United States and Mexico. We're going to have the honor of hearing from Ambassador Jerónimo Gutierrez, the Mexican ambassador, here before we have a discussion with two former ambassadors, Arturo Saracán, the Mexican ambassador to the United States, and Tony Wayne, our ambassador in Mexico back between 2011 and 2015. We're also going to hear from a variety of experts on trade, economic security, and migration, the issues and challenges that are facing both of our countries and complicating our relationship. Brookings has played an important role in terms of conducting policy research on Mexico and U.S.-Mexican relations for nearly a decade. Given the recent developments, we see an urgent need to mobilize the expertise that we have in-house and with our affiliated scholars to generate not only greater understanding in Washington, but also around the country through our Metro program, particularly in the border states between the United States and Mexico, which have firsthand experience of the relationship and are affected most by it. And therefore, this event also serves the purpose of being a kind of launch event for our new Mexico initiative. This will be a cross-Brookings effort to take advantage of the expertise across our research programs, from Metropolitan Program to the Foreign Policy Program to the Global Economy and Development Program, to produce in-depth, fact-based, independent policy research and practical, evidence-based solutions to strengthen and deal with the challenges in this vital relationship between the United States and Mexico. I have the pleasure of introducing Jerónimo Gutierrez. He is a distinguished Mexican public servant who has only arrived in Washington to take up his post in January of this year. So I think for him, drinking from the fire hose has real meaning. Before his arrival here, he served as managing director of the North American Development Bank that was headquartered in San Antonio, Texas. But before that, he has had a diverse 15-year career in the Mexican federal government, previously serving in the areas of trade, finance, diplomacy, and national security under 4 presidents. In 2009-2010, he served as Deputy Secretary for Governance and Homeland Security. He was also part of Mexico's National Security Council Executive Committee. Before that, he served as Undersecretary for Latin American and Caribbean Affairs in the Mexican Foreign Ministry. And before that, as Undersecretary for North America, where he coordinated the day-to-day trilateral and bilateral affairs between Mexico, the United States, and Canada, and supervised the operations of over 50 Mexican consular offices in the region. He also led negotiations for the creation of the Security and Prosperity Partnership for North America that was a prelude to the North American Leaders Summit. So he has deep experience in the Mexican-American relationship, and we're very grateful to him for coming today to introduce our symposium. Ambassador Gutierrez.
Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much, Martin, for that introduction. Thank you for the Brookings Institution for the invitation to be here this afternoon with all of you. It's not only an honor, but a pleasure. Ambassador Sarukan, it's always good to share the floor with you, Ambassador Wayne, and the rest of the people that are going to be in different panels. It certainly looks like it's going to be a very lively and a very well-informed discussion throughout the rest of the day. And I want to thank you again all for being here. One correction is that I actually arrived here in March, so it's even less of a time. You can imagine that the past 3 months have been quite interesting and in some way challenging, but certainly very positive, I think. I've in fact been dealing with foreign affairs and U.S. Mexico affairs for some time now. And one of the things that I've learned is that those who think that have all the answers of what is going on or what will, or especially what will happen, frequently end up being wrong. So I will try to just center my initial remarks on 3 questions, and then my comments I will therefore try to put them as hypotheses, just to be on the safe side. So the first question would be, is there a fundamental change in the U.S. Mexico relationship as a result of the Trump administration? The second one would be, is there actually room to revisit and renegotiate NAFTA in a way that it's beneficial for the 3 parties of the agreement? And the third one, is it possible to continue to display a very productive, in my view, security and law enforcement cooperation between the United States of Mexico if there is if the political climate of the overall bilateral relation is deeply deteriorated? So those, I think, are the 3 questions that I will center on. So for the first question, very briefly, is there a fundamental change? When I was being confirmed by the Mexican Senate, I did say something that I deeply believe in, which is that the bilateral relation is at a critical point. Not a crisis, but at a critical point. And that means that unless appropriate action is taken, I think it's likely that the status quo will be fundamentally different. I think there is a possibility of having a major setback in the relation still, but I also think that it is at hand the possibility of surpassing this phase on the bilateral relationship and actually having a much more mature relation between Mexico and the United States. In essence, the change is that over the past 25 years, the bilateral relation evolved very positively on different fronts: trade, security cooperation, the border, etc., in spite of differences. And it had been based fundamentally on 3 premises. The first one is that given our geographical proximity and our complementarities, it made a lot of sense to go into a full free trade agreement, and that we would benefit of that relationship. The second one was that as we have seen, as non-conventional security threats have become more important over the last 10, 15 years, it made a lot of sense to work together on security cooperation rather than point fingers at each other. And the third one, which is very general, but it was that whatever we need to address, whether it's the environment at the border, water at the border, migration, trade, that we were better off talking to each other again than just pointing fingers at each other. I think that summarized the premises that the relation has been based over the past 25 years. And I think, again, that the trend line is very positive. And I think quite clearly that some of these premises have been questioned. They were questioned in some way or another during the campaign, and in some way or another by positions that have been presented by the new administration. And therefore, I do believe that the idea about calling each other partners has been put in question. That is something I think important. I would say that the Mexicans have been hearing from administrations of different parties over the last, again, two decades, that we are partners with the United States. And suddenly it has appeared that our neighbor is not necessarily sure, at least based upon some of the positions that we've heard, that it really wants to be a partner. So I do think there's a fundamental change. I remain optimistic, however, that there is an honest intent of both sides to reach common ground, that over the course of the past 4 months, there have been contacts at different levels that have proved useful to clarify positions, to understand each other better, to establish more clearly lines of counterparts, and again, that this honest intent to find common ground will help us address the challenges that we do face in the bilateral relation in the immediate future. And I will conclude here this question by saying that I also do believe that if we, and I hope we do surpass this phase, we will have a more mature relationship. Because this is the first time, to put it in some label, that we have had a strong disagreement as quote-unquote partners. And that is an important difference. And usually what happens is when you have a partner and you have a strong disagreement, and nevertheless you both sit down and think, let's work this through, and you finally work it through, you end up knowing a little bit more about each other, understanding each other better, and think having an overall, a more mature and hopefully better relationship. And again, I do think that possibility is certainly at hand. And I do say that the intent of the Mexican government, in spite of the difference which have been made public, is to precisely do that. The second question relevant to today's conference is about trade. 2-3 years ago, 5 years ago, when people talked about NAFTA 2.0, it was the sort of discussion was different. It was the idea that we should continue to do things to remain competitive in an increasingly competitive environment worldwide, that we should, continue to harmonize regulations, labeling, to improve our border infrastructure to be more competitive, to have our business sectors interact further with each other. And that has largely been what was attempted at the Security and Prosperity Partnership, along with our Canadian friends, at the high-level economic dialogue, at different mechanisms that we have seen especially over the last 10 years or so. And now it's about something different. It's actually about, let's open up NAFTA and let's review it and let's renegotiate. And the question is, again, is there room that, as somebody has said, as the U.S. Chamber has said recently, is there room to do that in a way that nobody gets hurt? And first, do no harm. And I think that question largely remains unanswered, but I'm, again, moderately optimistic. There seems to be a growing narrative, perhaps even consensus, that the agreement is 23 almost 25 years old now, that there are things that can be improved, and there's different topics that have been voiced out there, working intellectual property, e-commerce, looking at some changes on the labor and environmental standards, including sectors that have changed because of technological advancement, like telecommunications or maybe even energy, and just simply have a better overall trade agreement. And in my view, as a result of conversations that I have had here and knowing what the Mexican line of thinking is, I think that's very likely and that's very possible. There is a legitimate concern here about manufacturing employment that has been clearly voiced by the administration. I would just say that it's a legitimate concern. It's unclear whether manufacturing employment has declined here as a result of trade or other reasons. I think that that does deserve a careful attention. There are some that would argue that manufacturing employment associated precisely with trade with NAFTA has actually grown, that manufacturing output has actually grown. And yes, free trade is in free trade. There will be industries and there will be specific firms that will go through hard times. The same has happened in Mexico. That's what free trade is all about. So if there are ways that we can address those concerns, if there's a way in which we can improve our market access among ourselves and better export, and if there's a way in which employment more and better jobs can be created in North America in a balanced way, by all means, let's sit down as soon as possible and let's begin looking at what those things. On the Mexican side, the principles which we believe should be upheld as a result of this process that now has formally kicked off are simple 3 or 4, is keep it trilateral. First, do no harm. Let's keep our trade and investment flows free as with any additional restriction beyond what we have already established. And let's try to close by the end of this year for reasons that are important. So is there room? I think there is. It will depend a lot as we see the administration here begin its consultation process during this 90-day period and hopefully get a better sense. There's still uncertainty about it. I would be remiss if I wouldn't say so, but I think it's going to be possible. And again, the contacts with interlocutors have proven so far useful. Difficult, but useful. Finally, what would happen? Is there a possibility to continue security cooperation and law enforcement cooperation between Mexico and the United States if there is a major meltdown, to put it some way? Let me try to address that in the following way. When you talk to U.S. agencies here, security agencies, I feel confident in saying that they will agree in general that A, they value the cooperation with Mexico, B, that the cooperation has improved significantly over the last 10, 15 years as a result of the effort on both sides and very competent people on both sides, that there's a clear understanding that we need to talk more about each other, further exchange intelligence, all sorts of things that we might get into detail later on, and that it's important to keep that cooperation because, again, there are, whether it's transnational organized crime or other non-conventional or non-state threats on security, those cannot be handled if you're not talking and working with your neighbor, period. And security strategies about identifying risks, assigning them probabilities that they will occur, and then trying to reduce those probabilities. That list of threats might not be exactly the same one on both sides, but there's a pretty good common denominator which we can work on. And that's where, in fact, we're doing on a daily basis. If there is a major derailment, setback on the relation, is that security cooperation at threat? Unfortunately, I think it is. It's not as a result of, just using it as a bargain chip. We're not going to discuss, agricultural trade vis-a-vis working with the DA. No, that's not the point. There are two reasons that I think would, could in fact affect. And just to make sure, we continue to work. Just last week, our foreign secretary was here, along with our Homeland Security secretary, meeting with its counterparts and 20 other people, looking, actually jump-starting a lot of things on security with the new administration. Mexico understands, and certainly President Peña's and Nieto's government, that it is in our best interest also to have that security. But if the political climate around the relation and within the relation is very deteriorated, there are things that could happen. And that people that believe in this cooperation and that push for it will have their margins of maneuver reduced. And secondly, just from a very clear operational basis, I think the figure is like 4 out of every 10 Mexicans have someone in the United States. So, we have right now around 90,000 people between, federal police, state police, the Army, the Navy, working on security matters. And the likelihood that any one of those has a cousin in Mexico, in the United States, that has maybe their mother living in Arizona is there. And it's more difficult to tell people, hey, we really need to do this. We need to fight heroin consumption and smuggling along with the United States, when unfortunately we sometimes see from the United States a rhetoric and a narrative that many Mexicans feel it's not in a partner stone, and it might be even somewhat aggressive, and that does not help. We wish to continue that cooperation. The possibilities of increasing it and improving it even further are significant, but it's important, and that's why the president has said we need to look at the relationship holistically. Those are my 3 questions and some thoughts some food for thought. Again, I thank you for being here, and I look forward to further discussion. Thanks.